Good morning and welcome to the press conference of the film The World to Come, a film that is the closing film. We will close the Pearl section of the 68th San Sebastian Film Festival. And in order to talk about the film, we have the pleasure of having here in San Sebastian the presence of one of the leading actresses, that's it, Catherine Waterston. Welcome to San Sebastian. By the way, thank you very much for being here. And before us opening the floor to the journalists, first of all, I would like to ask you to explain to us, how did you get involved in the project, which is so special? I think the role and a type of film which is completely different to the films that you've made in your career. What interested you or drew you to the film and to collaborate with the director Mona Fastvold?
Well, take these off to talk. Mona offered me the part in pretty much the standard way. She just sent me the script. I read the first page, well, not even the whole first page, and I knew I had to be in this film. There were a couple of different really interesting things on that first page. One was a phrase of voiceover that ultimately didn't make it into the film. And that piece of voiceover was, "At night I often wonder if those who have been my intimates have found me to be a steep hill whose view does not repay the ascent." And it still gives me chills. It so struck me, this idea that a woman who has very little, in the description at the beginning it's clear she's a farmer's wife, is quite isolated. At night, what haunts her is the notion not of what she doesn't have, but what she doesn't have to give, how she's failed others, rather than what she hasn't gotten for herself. And that so fascinated me. And then another thing on the first page, in the character description, she's described as an asset to her husband. And I thought that was such a fascinating idea. Well, just all the negative and positive connotations within the word asset. So I kind of, from the first page, felt like I was dealing with a masterpiece. I couldn't believe it was in my lap. And yes, I knew I would do it. So it's a pretty good way to choose projects. If you just know you have to do it. If you have to think about it a lot, it's probably not the job for you. So this one, it was just about how and when. And Mona was incredibly generous with me and dedicated to me, because I was pregnant at the time that I read the script, and she waited for me. And I am so grateful for that.
Muy bien.
Good. We had a question in the front.
On the film and your performance in it, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about it is how did you shape this character in this context with all the specific things that she represents in the story?
Why am I doing this? It was a big job, and it took a long time. And I was really grateful to have the time to really live with the character, because I was pregnant when I was offered the part, and they waited for me to have my child to film the movie. It meant that I had about almost 2 years with the part. And that it's so rare to get that much time with a character before you actually go to film something, but it's such a gift because, well, for an actor like me, because I'm not very interested in, I think there's a big difference between getting a character right and getting it in your bones. And when you have a lot of time with the script, you can work on it, your sort of subconscious can work on the character. And so over time you start to just know her. It's like spending time with a real person. It sort of takes seasons to really get to know a person. You have to spend time. So that, in an indirect sense, was hugely helpful to me. Then more specifically, I had the job of working out, and this was critical to this film, how much do I show of her in the scenes? If I show too much of her in the scenes, why do we have the voiceover? There had to be a stark difference between her exterior, what she shows the world, and what goes on inside. Now, this is true for all human beings, of course, but she's a slightly exaggerated version because she has so much inside and such a repressed way in the world with the people even that she cares about most. So to find that calibration was really important. Obviously, I also, well, I was pregnant at the time, and I was preparing to play someone who'd lost their child. So that was a very uncomfortable place to be, but also one that I think really informed my performance and really helped me carry this weight internally, because again, she doesn't show it very much, right? So it was important, and it's a strange kind of thing to pursue, but to feel the weight of her suffering, just to feel it, to carry it through the scenes, but not always, very rarely show it. So, I mean, I could go on and on. I'm such a nerd about preparation, but I don't want to bore anyone.
Sí. Quizá extendiendo un poco.
And going on about this question, adding to this question, how did you work with Vanessa Kirby? Because there's a special chemistry in the film and the two characters are completely different, or very different. I don't know how you worked on this together to establish that such a special relationship between the two of you.
Well, firstly, we're just lucky because we actually like each other. I think admire each other's work, respect each other. So to a certain degree, that kind of does the job for you. I recommended Vanessa to Mona because I knew that there had to be a distinct contrast between these two women, that, to use the language of our times, Vanessa sort of was like a respirator for Abigail, or Tally was like a respirator for Abigail. She is a life force, that character, and she breathes life into my character. So it was really important that we found an actress to play that part who was willing to take up space on the screen, and it's something that is hard to find these days. And I really didn't think, frankly, anybody else could do the part. I just thought it had to be Vanessa, and I didn't know what we were going to do if she said no. So, I went into it so enthusiastic to work with her. We work in very different ways, but they are compatible ways. And then I think the other thing is when the writing is really good, the chemistry is easier to find. And the tension between these characters and the way created by the writers and the way that they are so often speaking in code to one another really helped us find the kind of that sort of relational dance. But also, she's just easy to love.
No sé si hay alguna pregunta más.
Yes, any further questions? Yes, we have one here. Hi, congratulations for the film. I think it's a beautiful film, and we should all see, I think. But my question is related to your performance, because many scenes we only see you performing without any dialogues, with the voice over. How difficult was it for you? That's it. Because it's only action, and you're guided by a voiceover that perhaps you only have on the you only see on the script. How did you portray that? Thank you very much beforehand, by the way.
Well, Mona was really smart about it and had me working with the voiceover while we were on set. And so I would often just do a kind of rough recording of it on the day, and we would do takes where the voiceover was playing. And so then I would sort of feel it in the scene. It was also kind of a technical issue because we wanted to make sure, because Mona did a lot of shots, single shots. We needed to be sure that the voiceover would fit within that shot. So sometimes we did it for technical reasons, but also very much so that I could feel and be reminded when we were shooting out of sequence what was going on for the character, that moment was going on inside. And then we would scrap the voiceover and I would continue on doing the scene, but I'd have it in my head, and that was very helpful. It was a very unusual way to work for me. We made the film in 2 sections. We went to Romania and shot the spring and summer section, and then we took a break and we came back to get the winter and fall. And so that alone, working in sections, was very strange or unusual for me. But then I also sort of feel, for my character or my work in the film, I made the film in 3 parts, actually, because I then, when we were in post-production, went in and redid all that voiceover with Mona, and that was such a really satisfying but painstaking process, working with her and just trying to find exactly the right calibration for everything. It was normally when you do voiceover work or you have to do a little ADR, it's kind of grim and you're in this little box, and it can be kind of tiring, and you miss the wonderful energy on set of working with co-stars. But this time, this experience for this film, it was so in depth with Mona. I felt like she was sort of my scene partner. We were working so closely together to get it right. And it honestly made me want to become an editor, working with her and figuring out exactly, and with our amazing editor, David, and trying to figure out how to get the voiceover embedded in the film. It was so important that to Mona and to me that it didn't sort of feel like an afterthought, that something was tacked on top of the film, but like embedded in the film. So that was an incredible part of the process for me. Yeah.
También.
Also, very interesting what you've just said, because using voiceover in the film, I think it's very interesting, because it's the intimate journal of this woman, or diary, for example. That's the only space she can express what she feels. She can't express it, socially speaking, in a social surrounding. How was it to get in? You've got the feeling that, for example, the physical feelings are right, routine and mechanical, but it's the voice which expresses everything that she can't show or reveal, all of her desire, etc. Could you explain how you worked upon this as well?
Yes. I just had a really good idea that I've forgotten. How do I say this? I always thought that Abigail wasn't simply she wasn't a shy person. She was a person living at a time where her inner life and her outer life could not flow naturally. She couldn't show what was going on inside in the environment that she lived in. sort of like she couldn't make sense of this vast difference between the person she wanted to be and the person that circumstances forced her to be. It's just an idea that actually really helped me get into the character, and that I didn't entirely struggle to relate to. I think when one feels that the world won't appreciate or understand or embrace what they have to give, one often retreats, shuts down. And so it was important for me to not be bashful, to not just not know how to be around people. It's not that she doesn't know how to be around people, it's that she doesn't feel that the outside world will embrace what she has to give, so she keeps it inside. She can't unite herself, her exterior self and her interior self. I think we all struggle with this to a certain degree. It's quite scary to sort of to plant your feet and admit who you are to others, and you know, certainly in her time, the consequences for doing that, for sort of admitting who she was, were unknown, but you know, serious. What would her husband do if she said, you know, actually, I don't know why this marriage was essentially arranged, and I'd like to travel the world. You know, she's an asset to him. They're in an economic relationship. He depends upon her to make the farm function. There's not, you know, I think at best she'd be stared at with disbelief. So, yeah, so that's a long way around to just saying that the voiceover was so critical to the development of the character, it was such a way in for me to understand, what is this person? Why does she have all of this to say? And no outlet for it except for the page. It was the world she lived in didn't have room for her inner life until Tally comes along.
Ujú, muy bien. Sí, teníamos aquí otra.
Yes, we have another question here.
Again, I have two more questions. One is about the relationship with Casey Affleck, because I thought it was a very interesting relationship in the film. And the other question is about, I'm a Potterhead, so I couldn't help to ask. I know that you can't talk about the third Fantastic Beasts film, but any feeling you have about the film, or any little detail you can tell about it?
I probably can't share anything at all. We're filming it now, and everybody's so happy that they were able to get back to work. We have an amazing crew, and obviously coronavirus has been hard, has hit all industries hard. So it's just so great that this big crew is able to get back to work and get paid. And it's a wonderful treat for me, because I don't have any other, I've never been on a TV series that runs for many years. This is the only time I've worked with the same colleagues again and again. You know, our families grow and change. We're really doing time together. So it's wonderful to be reunited. And yeah, I don't think I can say anything else about it. In terms of the relationship between Dyer and Abigail, I thought it was so smart on the page, just when I first read the script, that, there was love there, that this arrangement had its limitations, but also was meaningful to both of them, and that they cared about each other a great deal. I thought it made it that much more dramatic when Abigail falls in love with Tally, because it's not so simple for her. She's not just running from a miserable partner, and in fact, just the opposite. She's got a partner. They've been through the worst imaginable thing together, which is something I think that has really bonded them, the loss of their child. And I think in the scene near the end where I'm quoting Shakespeare to Tally in the woods, I'm suggesting, can we carry on like this under the circumstances? And she says, I can't live like that. But for Abigail, that's her way of trying to figure out essentially how to have it all, because her partnership with Dyer is meaningful. And I think I also loved, though there were probably few spouses around the world like him in those days, there were some, and it's a nice thing to remember. That it's always possible, even in societies and situations that might encourage unhealthy power dynamic. It's always possible for the individual to be more generous and moral and fair. I love how Dyer, even though reluctantly, takes her to go see Tally near the end of the film, He could have tied her to the house physically, and that would have sort of been within his rights during the time. He could have shot her. He could have beaten her to a pulp. Those were all things that men did to their spouses in those days. So I love the contrast, really, between Dyer and Tally's husband. It's I think it just makes the film more interesting.
No sé si hay alguna pregunta.
Not sure whether there are any further questions. If not, I'm going to give the floor. Well, I'm going to ask a question that's just been sent via the internet online. I'm going to summarize. They ask about the historical atmosphere, how to recreate that historical period, because they've achieved it. You've achieved it very well. Was there any research? How was that documented? For example, the costume design is marvelous. Both women dress in a different way, and that subtly expresses the difference between their characters. Could you talk a bit more about that, please?
Glad you noticed that they dress in different ways, because there's so much expressed visually, obviously, in film. And we don't talk so much about the difference between these two couples. We don't talk about it in the film, but we tried to express it that one family is a bit more reckless with money. It's not necessarily that they have more, but they might take certain loans out to have a nicer hanging lamp, or Tally's able to have slightly nicer clothes. My clothes, I really wanted them to look as though I had made them. Also, to make the moment where I decide to buy that dress later in the film, like something, like to make it clear that she's treating herself. And so that stuff's really important. I like the idea that it kind of works on an audience and they don't really realize it, but they're picking up on these cues as they get deeper into the story. I can't remember the beginning of the question. Do you remember?
Sí.
Yes. What the period, how it was recreated, was that documented, or any inspiration or any research, or how was that researched?
The film was written by two historical fiction writers, and they had a wealth of knowledge about this period. So I wrote to them and found a bunch of books that were sort of out of print and about farming in New England in the mid-1800s. Pretty niche stuff, But it was really, really helpful. Learning about what you do if your pig is sick and stuff. I don't know if it necessarily informed my performance, but it made me feel more, connected to the period and of that world. And so they were hugely helpful, but also just in the script, in the language, they were so careful to use the language of the time, and this is very much an area of expertise for them. I think that the whole idea for the short story that the film is based on was a farm log from the period that one of those two writers found. And in the farm log, it was all just information about the farm, how many eggs were sold this week, the barn needs fixing, this kind of thing. And then there was just this one personal note, hundreds of pages, one personal note, which was, my best friend has moved away. I do not think I shall ever see her again. And this whole story came out of that one little entry. So they were a wonderful help in my preparation, and when we were on set, we consulted them a great deal.
Sí, tendríamos tiempo para una última pregunta.
We have time for one final question. Yes, we have a question at the back.
Micro.
You worked with directors like Danny Boyle, Lee Scott, Paul Thomas Anderson. What type of directors most interest you, and what characters are those bring about more, that you feel are more of a challenge? What are you more interested when you choose, I think he means, a character for a film?
In terms of the first part of the question, I like good directors. So they come in a lot of shapes and sizes, but I am quite picky about working with the good ones because, for so many reasons. Because I obviously, it's always a risk when you make a film, if it's going to work, if all the various elements are going to come together into something cohesive and interesting. So, you want to set yourself up for the potential of success. And one good way to do that is by working with people who are smarter than you, and people who have a really strong narrative sense and a really strong visual language, all their own, and so that's why I suppose I've always gravitated towards talented directors. But I don't think that I'm an exception in that. I think everybody tries to get their hands on the best directors that will agree to work with them. And so almost everything comes down to, I think everything actually, in terms of deciding what roles to do, comes down to the people involved. Who wrote it? Is it good? Who's directing it? Are they good? Those are kind of like, I tend to overthink things and complicate things, so it's probably all I really need to ask myself to figure out what to do. And then in terms of the characters, I suppose when I read a script, it pretty much comes down to whether or not I can see them. It's like when you read a good novel, you start to sort of build the characters in your mind. You start to think you know how they walk, or what their hair looks like or something, and it's not necessarily in the description, it's just a feeling you have for them. And so that's what I suppose I look for. I look for whether or not my curiosity is triggered by the script, and if it is, my curiosity does the job for me. So that's the way I like to do it. I don't know what I'm saying.
Muy bien.
Okay, and in order to finish, one final question. It seems, and I think that the film fits into a certain trend in not only in American cinema but in worldwide cinema, of women directors who are trying to rewrite the past from a woman's standpoint, because the standpoint was normally in the past written by men, and men were the actors, and now it's been written by women. I would like to know, what do you feel vis-a-vis whether this is really happening, or do you feel this is something is happening in cinema and filmmaking, that women are not only direct more and more films, but also to tell the stories from a woman's standpoint, and whether the title of the film, The World to Come, is prophetic? That is, say, do you think that this is a trend that's going to be consolidated and it's going to get bigger and bigger?
The title is prophetic. That would be good. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I can identify when I watch a film all the aspects of the filmmaking that are like inherently male or inherently female, you know, masculine or feminine. What are these ideas? You know, I think some male filmmakers have done a wonderful job of portraying women whole, you know, as yeah, and have done that beautifully. But I think it's important that everybody gets to tell stories. Everybody who has business making films should be able to make films, meaning anybody who's got a really good idea, has a unique vision. I want to see their perspectives, but I want to see their perspectives sort of realized on film. And I think it's good for the world the more representation there is in cinema. I think we feel a lot better when we see stories like The World to Come, directed by a woman, and starring two women with these amazingly talented male actors happily taking the supporting roles. Mm-hmm. This is so encouraging. It's such a big deal to include that as well, actually, that a lot of men are quite reluctant to do this, mm-hmm. and we've been doing it for them forever. So that's a wonderful thing. But what we really have to work on is the bigger picture, the whole crew, you know, to have crews be more balanced. A lot of what you don't see behind the camera still ends up being predominantly male, and you know, so we're in a good place, and we have more work to do. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, bueno, pues.
Okay, we have to finish. We would just like to thank Catherine Waterston for coming to San Sebastian.
Good luck with your film. Thank you.